Nana, it's me, AV, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Guys, it's been a little bit of time since we've done a case brief. I am so excited to be able to do another case brief, and this is something that you guys asked for. We did a poll, right? And what was that poll about? That poll was about some of the different Supreme Court decisions that we can dive into. And you guys chose something interesting. Y'all want to talk about guns. You want to talk about the Second Amendment and the right to bear arms. And that's what we're going to do in this particular series. We're going to start off with a 2008 decision, and that is the Heller decision. So we're going to talk about that, but before we get into that, let me introduce myself. My name is AV. I am a third-year law student. I'm so excited. And if you found this channel, what do we talk about here? We do law school case briefs where we talk about some of the Supreme Court decisions in major constitutional law cases. We also talk about part-time law school and a few other things when it comes to lifestyle. Because one thing about your girl going to law school part-time, I've learned a thing or two about saving time. So that's something that you'll learn about on this channel. We also have a personal growth podcast happening as well. Really good stuff. But without further delay, let's get started. So before we can even get started in the text of the case, I thought it was really important to give you guys a refresher on what the Second Amendment text says in the United States Constitution. And that reads, "A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, to the right of the people to keep and bear arms, shall not be infringed." Important for you guys to realize as we get into this discussion, right? We want to look at what the original text says before we analyze or look at anything. Introduce our case. What are we talking about today? We're talking about the District of Columbia v. Heller. It is 554 U.S. 570, and it's a 2008 case. And let's talk about the issue. The issue is always an important thing. You know, this is an important note card. It's an important note card. All right, what does the issue say? Does a law prohibiting the possession of a usable handgun in the home, in your house, does it violate the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution? Remember, we just talked about the right to bear arms and that how that should not be infringed, right? You got to think about the Constitution. It was written back in the 1700s, late 1700s. This case was decided in 2008. So it should be interesting to see what the court says. I will say that the McDonald case came after this one, and that's coming up. But also it's an interesting decision because we did not look at the original text, the Second Amendment, since the 1930s. So this case was interesting in 2008 for that. There are different loopholes. There are other cases that have happened since this time, you know, especially when it comes to long arm and, you know, assault weapons and all of those things. And you got a lot going on in the country right now, but you know me, I keep my personal opinions out of it. What I am here to do is to give you guys the facts of the case. That being said, let's talk procedural history. So for procedural history, what do we have here? We have Heller, who filed a lawsuit in the federal district court in the District of Columbia. This is important. The reason why is because the District of Columbia is not a state. Okay, you really need to stick with me on that and pay attention to that fact as we go through this, right? And what did Heller argue? Heller argued that the city's bar on the registration of handguns, okay, and he was a police officer, keep this in mind as well, and its prohibitions on guns in the home without a license, and its requirement of trigger locks in addition to that license for lawful guns in the home, all violated the Second Amendment. He's just like, hey, these two things violates the Second Amendment. These are my constitutional rights. I don't feel like you guys are sticking to that here, right? The district court dismissed Heller's complaint. And what does that mean? When your complaint gets dismissed, that means it's introduced into court. And when it's dismissed on its face, that's a little crazy. That's pretty much like the court saying, hey, I don't want to hear your case at all. The Court of Appeals, which is the second layer of review here, reversed on the grounds that the Second Amendment grants an individual the right to bear arms. This eventually landed in the Supreme Court for Certiorari. I can never say that. Some people say cert. That's what I say. Like learning this in law school, I've eventually come to cert. But certiorari. All right, what are we talking about next? The next section of this case brief is the holding. Like I said, I want to make sure that you guys know how the case ends up before we move into the facts, the details, the reasoning, and all of those things. How did this case end up? The answer to the question is yes. Although the Second Amendment appears to have been created for the purpose of ensuring the creation of a future militia, right back in the 1700s, that made sense. This purpose ultimately does not change the fact that the Second Amendment, what was it designed for? It was designed to create an individual right to keep and bear arms. How does that extend into your home? Well, let's find out. Let's talk about the facts, right? What are the facts? Where's the tea? Where does all of this lie within this particular case? What are the facts? Dick Heller, short for Richard. Dick Heller, a Washington, D.C. special police officer, so he was a law enforcement officer. He applied for a registration for a certificate from the city of Washington, D.C. for a handgun that he wished to keep at home, okay? So in your home, in your dwelling, right? A D.C. statute prohibited, this is the thing, pay attention to that, it's a statute, which means essentially it's a law, all right? It prohibited possessing a handgun in the home without a license, which is why he applied, right? It also required any lawful handgun kept in the home to be rendered inoperable through the use of a trigger lock, okay? So you have to have it with the trigger lock. Here's the best part. DC, the defendant in this case, denied Heller's application for a registration of certificate based on its law. The other thing that I'll mention too is that there was some talk of the handgun also being disassembled. So if you want to go through the training and experience to have a handgun in your home for the purposes of self-defense, if it's disassembled and if there is an emergency situation, right? We always like to look at both sides over here, right? Kind of like, you know, the scales of justice. You want to look at one argument, you want to look at the second argument, and you want to see where we can land in the middle. Let's talk a little bit about the rule. In 2008, when this case was decided, the rule was subject to certain safety limitations. The Second Amendment to the United States Constitution creates an individual right to keep and bear arms apart from any military purpose, okay? That was the important thing here, because if you think about DC, it wasn't necessarily a state. What does the Constitution regulate? It regulates the laws in the land, but also states have individual laws and regulations that they can employ, right? DC wasn't a state. Let's talk about the last thing, and that is the reasoning in this particular case. That means, hey, how did the court come up with the decision that it came up with? You guys know in Supreme Court decisions, it is based off of majority rule, okay? Meaning you have a set of 7 to 9 justices, and the majority rule, depending on the decision that they want to make, becomes the law of the land. Of course, you have the dissents. In this case, Justice Scalia wrote the opinion. You also had a dissent from Justice Breyer and Justice Stevens. So let's look at what they say. In the reasoning, here we go. Nothing suggests that the individual right to keep and bear arms is conditional on being for a strictly military purpose. That's why I wanted to start, guys, with reading out what the actual text of the Constitution states, right? It was for the purpose of a militia, but you also have to look at the modern conception as well. In 2008, there was a concern, maybe not everywhere, But there is a general concern of people wanting to bear arms, and why would they want to do that? A big reason why they may want to do that is for the purposes of self-protection at home, which is a very valid reason. Some people use it for hunting purposes and recreation. The right to bear arms is included in the Constitution, so many gun owners were looking at this. It wasn't just Heller. Heller was one of the people, but you have big groups like the NRA and other groups that found this as being super concerning. Again, this wasn't reviewed from 1930 until 2008. That's a large gap in time, right? So of course, time changes and many things change over time, but this group was really concerned about looking at the regulation that DC had and how it would impact the rest of the land. Let's continue. States must be free to regulate. So we talked about the states, right? Who can possess firearms based on certain safety concerns, which is fair, right? For example, states are free to deny handgun registration and possession to felons. Think about this. You want to have firearms in your home for the purposes of protection. Understandable, right? Some people disagree. That's okay. But at the end of the day, if it's for a safety concern, that's what this case is about. That is the conclusion of this case. I'm going to continue on with a string of cases that dive deeper into this, because sometimes what happens is you might have something that comes along in 2008, and then in 2012 maybe it gets overturned because another case comes along the way. Or, you know, in the country right now we have a lot of push and pull when it comes to the Second Amendment, when it comes to gun rights and lawful ownership of guns in the country. Lots of dialogue and conversation kind of happening here right now. Of course, I keep my personal opinions out of it. I'm just here to share the facts of this particular case and share the other cases with you. I thank you guys for watching. My name is AV. Again, I hope that you like, comment, subscribe. What did you learn from this video? What do you think about the Second Amendment and what the original text says? I'm super excited to dialogue with you guys in the comments. If you haven't already, please subscribe. And if you haven't already, check out my other case briefs. There are more coming, and there's a lot of really cool ones on the Second Amendment, but we've done a lot of stuff with recent decisions like Roe v. Wade. Check that out. Anywho, I thank you guys for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye.